right, did you give it a start? All right, welcome everybody for this big sold-out event here in this presentation. This is the social API. Who here has, you guys are all Drupal people, you've all worked Drupal?
Yeah.
Are anybody new? Okay, you're new. Okay, well, in the Drupal world, you've used a module before, right? There's lots of them.
Yeah.
One of the problems which...
4 every minute.
2000, right?
So that's kind of one of Drupal's downfalls, that there's too many of these options, and a lot of these modules they're on top of each other. They're accomplishing the same goals, different people are writing them in different ways, and this is kind of what the social API is all about. Think about if you've ever seen a module like Twitter post, Facebook login, all these kinds of things. Now we have a kind of consolidated way to do it. So if this is what you're interested in and a little bit of background of how it came to be, how to use it, you're in the right place. About me, my name is Matthew Lechleider, aka Slurpee. I've been on Drupal.org for over 10 years. If you've ever been to an event in Chicago, I founded the Chicago Drupal user group. I organized several camps like this. We had a con at one point. But these days I spend the majority of my volunteer contribution times for the Google Summer of Code and Code-In programs. Are you guys familiar with GSoC? Okay, well, we're going to talk about that through this because this is kind of how this social API module all came together. But hold on one second. And then, so yeah, mentoring. That's kind of my big thing these days. Again, I used to do a lot of organizing. I organized over hundreds of events, did a lot of trainings, and again, these days I really like to mentor students like Valentin here.
Hello, my name is Valentin. I'm from Paraguay. I'm doing computer science and political science at Swarthmore College, like 20 minutes away from here. I was a Google Coding 2014 Grand Prize winner, and I did GSoC in 2016. I'm currently mentoring both of the programs, and I like to play soccer, ping pong, but my favorite sport is to ask government organizations for open data. And I like it when data is under arrest, but not under arrest. And that's kind of a background of me. And
yeah. So again, what is this Google Summer of Code and Code-In stuff? We're going to kind of sneak this in here as a kind of a background story. Again, this is how it all came to be. If you've been in the Drupal community for a while, you've probably recognized some of those, especially in Philly, you probably know Alex. Alex has been around in this community for a long time. He actually used to organize the Google Summer of Code stuff prior to me doing it. Have you ever heard of WebChick? Angie Byron, she is one of the top people in Drupal, and she actually got her start in Google Summer of Code. That's how she found out about Drupal. She did a project. So what is it exactly? Google essentially pays students to work on open source projects. Last year, Drupal had 10 projects. Google paid $5,500 per project. That means Google donated over $55,000 worth of development to Drupal. And we do things like port modules to Drupal 8 and update some different, it's usually just module ports. I mean, if you use the FAQ module in Drupal 8, we did that a couple years ago. The social API project and this one. So the Summer of Code is one big project, for one student, like the social API or FAQ. The Code-In is for high school students ages 13 to 17, and they compete to work on a bunch of small tasks, everything from create a video screencast. We even had one student write social auth for Amazon. Like a high school student wrote that in like 3 days.
actually one day.
But so yeah, again, this Code-In is for high school students, and they try to win a trip to Google. That's like the whole thing. You compete in this contest and you win. And guess who won this about 4 years ago? So you hear these stories about like people like WebChick kind of coming up through Google Summer of Code and climbing the ladder. This is a real success story. This kid is I don't even say he's a kid, he's growing up before my eyes here, but he is the future of Drupal, or at least one of these people. He went through the Google Code-In, won that, hung out with me at Google in San Francisco. Then he did the Google Summer of Code with the social API thing. Now he helps me organize both programs. And then on top of that, he just did his first presentation at Drupalcon in Nashville. So he's literally I don't know what else we can do for you except have more contributions and everything. Okay, so what is this social API? Enough of that Google Summer of Code stuff. Let's get into this. So I'm sure you've probably heard of all of these providers. If you want to have any of these providers and more working with your website, whether people are logging in from these networks, posting to or from these networks to your Drupal site or from your Drupal site. This is what you want. Social API is all about that. Again, there's so many modules out there in the Drupal community, so many people overwriting different work. It's kind of a shame. We're kind of consolidating all of this stuff. And why should you use the social API? Just like a couple of quick ideas of things you could do. Have you ever heard of Hootsuite? It's a software as a service that's been around for a while, but it's essentially like a social media marketing platform. You can plan out all your tweets and all your posts, and it gives you all sorts of analytical data, like if you're doing better at Facebook, if you're doing better at Twitter, and it gives you all sorts of cool stuff, scheduling out all the postings and all that. You could build your own Hootsuite with this module in Drupal and a couple other things. That's just kind of one idea to get you thinking. Have you ever heard of Janrain? Janrain is another software as a service provider that basically does this for money. They've been doing it for a while, and like there was a Drupal 6 module, there's a Drupal 7 module. If you pay for Janrain, you essentially just added this module and you could log in through Facebook, Twitter, Google, all of that. But it's actually really expensive for what it's doing. You can do it for free here. Then of course, we want to consolidate communication with, we're connecting with all these different providers, right? We want to connect with them in a common way, not just have one person write one module and this person writes it one way and another person writes it. We have a common way for people to come and collaborate, and if they want to write or contribute to the social API, it's very easy to just jump in and start working on it. Then of course, it's going to save everybody time, because if you're like, oh, I need to throw on Twitter on this page, the very first thing you do in the Drupal world is start Googling Drupal module X. Do I need it for this site, this, that, and the other? Anything with social stuff, just know you can kind of come here, and there's a consolidation in the community of people that are working on this. And here's one more cool idea.
Oh, God.
How nice would it be to, you're pulling in all this data about all your users, you can collect it, and you can sell it to, companies that might be interested in that type of information. That's kind of more of a joke, but I hope you're getting the ideas of these kinds of things that you could accomplish.
And actually, I hope you understand that it's a joke, because that's actually illegal. So we are not encouraging.
There's just a joke at the right time. Right place.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got into Drupal. I got into Drupal thanks to Sugar Labs. Basically, I got an email from a GCI mentor for Sugar Labs, which is another open source organization, to participate in Google Coding 2013. I didn't complete any task because of technical issues. Namely, that I didn't speak English, so I didn't understand anything. So the following year, I decided that I wanted to complete 3 tasks, because the rule is that if you complete 3 tasks during Google Coding, you get a Google T-shirt. And who doesn't want a Google T-shirt? Especially if you are a high school student, you just want to go to high school and show you, look at my T-shirt, that's cool. So I finished during GCI 2014, I finished my first 3 tasks, and I was just happy because I already have the T-shirt. But something interesting happened, and that was that my first patch was committed. And it was very interesting to know that people around the world will be using code that you wrote. So I got excited about it, and I started working more and more during the competition. At the end of GCI, which is like a 7 weeks competition, I ported around 7 modules from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, including easy ones like scroll to top, and to harder ones like administer users by role. And I contributed to some patches to Drupal core. And then in 2016, I did Google Summer of Code, and I worked on the social API, which is basically a project to harmonize authentication and auto-posting tasks with external services on Drupal. And I like to think that the social API exists only because I wanted a Google T-shirt, and this is how my closet looks like right now. It's not because I am a big fan of Google, it's just because I don't like spending money on clothes. I think that's fair. But let's get to be in business. Let's talk more in detail about the social API and how it's working. But before talking, I just want to show the code. That's more important. You can get you can see more about the project on the project website at Drupal.org/project/. social API, or you can just Google social API Drupal. And a little bit of the background on why this is important. And the first thing is that I was looking for different modules for authentication for Google and Facebook. And I found out that I found different modules, but all of them were completely incompatible with each other. They were doing completely different things. One of them was using the email address. One of them was using the Google user ID to authenticate users, and you couldn't have like a user authenticated with Facebook and Google at the same time because these modules were not working together. So it was a mess. And I thought, well, maybe there should be a way to do this more easily on Drupal because it's just authentication. People can they're just similar modules doing the same thing. And I told myself, maybe I'm not the first one thinking about it. And I did intensive research. I went to google.com and typed my question and clicked on the first link, and that was the Drupal Social Initiative, which was a group of people who already thought about this, like developing a common API to authenticate users. But the problem was that they have all this planning, all this potential architecture. There was a small problem with the group, and that was that they haven't written any single line of code. And I think code is important in a software development project.
Yeah, an idea can only take you so far.
So I contacted Daniel, who was one of the most active members, and he agreed to mentor during GSoC. And I also contacted Matteo, who likely was developing something called a social autopost back then. And he was basically thinking of the same thing, but only for autoposting. So most of the architecture that we are using in Social API was inspired by the Social Autopost module. So that's I'm just giving credit to Matteo. And in GSoC, we divided the development in two phases. The phase one was about developing the base code for the Social API. We have something called social oaths and social posts, which are running on top of Social API, and something called social widgets, which is not very popular, mainly because we stopped maintaining it. And then in phase two, we developed a bunch of implementers. Implementers are just modules that work on top of social oaths and social posts for working with different services, like an implementer for Facebook works for Facebook, and an implementer for Google works for Google.
So to be clear, so there's multiple modules here. There's a social API, and there's also social auth. But then there's a collection of social auth modules. Social auth Facebook, social auth LinkedIn, and you can pick and choose what you want.
I'm going to show a little bit of the architecture in a minute. Actually, this is the architecture that we have. You can imagine that each rectangle is a different module. So we have the Drupal core, and on top of the Drupal core we have the social API. And on top of the social API, you can have the social auth and or the social post. They're completely like independent, because maybe you just need to authenticate users but not post to their accounts. And on top of the social auth, you have all these implementers, which are like for Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Twitter, and there are like 25 or more right now. And for social posts, we have other implementers like Twitter, LinkedIn, Slack, and Facebook. Hopefully, we're gonna have more in the future. And this was the development of Social API, and these are like the key features, basically the philosophy of the project. We wanted a module that was like protocol and library agnostic. We didn't want to depend on a protocol. Like, we wanted to be compatible with OAuth 2, OAuth 1, Hope, and any library that you want to use, any PHP library, you can use it. We wanted a common API, a common code and functionality among implementers. We don't want a module to work in this way, but the other module works in a completely different way. So that was like a very interesting thing about developing a common API for all these kind of modules. And I wanted to be easy to develop new implementers. In fact, I can assure that it is true because Google coding students have done it in the past, like high school students developing implementers in one day. So that's pretty amazing, and I think that's because of because developing new implementers like very easy. Basically, you have to copy and paste code, and that's a very cool thing.
It's great. Even for a high school student, they can just kind of look at the code and kind of copy and paste and change Facebook to Twitter and look at the new API and what might be a little, and they're figuring it out. It's that even, and for an actual developer with some programming experience, sure, it'd be pretty easy to jump in and start contributing.
And this is one of the implementers. This is Social Post Twitter, which is for auto posting tasks on Twitter. Okay, let's play it. Well, first you go to the settings. You can just go to Twitter. Then from Twitter you can copy the key and the API secret that you get from Twitter, and just copy that into the settings. Then, in this case, I decided to use rules. You don't have to use rules. You can use the API directly, but to avoid writing code, you can just use rules as well. So you go to rules, and you create a new reaction rule, and then the reaction rule, you just configure the reaction rule. We're gonna say that we wanna tweet every time the user or someone creates a new content on the website. And then we're gonna choose an action, and that action is to tweet every time someone creates a new content. And then we specify the value. For instance, this is a post with whatever, and we can just pass a token, which is like the title of the post. We use this video for Drupalcon, that's why you have the hashtag Drupalcon. Then we just save. We save the rule action, and we now go to the user. Users can authenticate with Twitter, so they can post on their Twitter account. I can add a Twitter account to my Drupal user. I can add as many Twitter accounts as I want. I added only one of them, which is Twitter testing. That's the name that's the Twitter account. And then if I go to content and I create a new content, suppose an article, let's say social post Twitter, I just create random content and save it. Okay, and now if I go to Twitter and I go to my account, I can see and that was without writing a single line of code with rules. You can just do it easily. Okay, let's go to, okay, that was during GSoC 2016, but we needed more. We needed more because we were not there quite. We were not there quite yet. So we developed something during GSoC 2017. We were on Social API 2.x, and it was developed by Himanshu, who was a GSoC student last year. And basically, the problem was that we were not storing data in the database, so I couldn't associate a Google account and a Facebook account and a GitHub account to the same Drupal user, because it depended only on the email address. So I couldn't have multiple accounts associated to the same Drupal user, and that was something that we didn't like. And also we didn't have like a common library using, and so people started using different kind of PHP libraries, and it was making the development of new implementers kind of hard when we wanted actually to simplify all of this. So during what Himanshu did during during GSoC was to add support for PHP Delic, which is like a library which divides all of these authentication with different providers. Like you have a library for Facebook, another one for Google, another one for Twitter, and all of these have like similar structure, similar APIs.
Have you guys ever heard of the League? It's a PHP thing. They do more than authentication. There's groupings of PHP developers coming together to accomplish common tasks in a similar way. Kind of what we're doing here. Example, they have one for CSV uploading in PHP. You know, there's a million ways to do that in PHP, but these people came together and do it in a common way, and everybody contributes back to that. One of the pieces of the league that people came together is how to do a lot of this authentication stuff. So we're utilizing that library, building on top of it.
Especially because they're trying to create like standards and make people agree on how to develop things. Also, Himanshu worked on updating existing implementers since there were like major API changes, so we had to update all the implementers that were developed before. And he added a bunch of implementers for social auth, around 10 or 15, including Instagram, GitHub, and others. And then he created, as an example of social posts, he created social post LinkedIn and added more implementers to the social API, including social posts, Facebook, Slack, Twitter. He updated Twitter as well. And we choose the leak OAuth2 library for the default, even though we are still library agnostic. You don't have to use the leak to develop a new implementer. We prefer to use the leak because in this case you can just literally copy and paste code, because the leak is using the same API for everything. So you don't have to worry about different implementation of different libraries. We were thinking about hybrid auth library as well, but the problem with hybrid auth is that it's discontinued. Nobody is supporting it anymore. And because the leak supports a large list of social network libraries, around I think like 40 or 50, so it was the right choice for this project because we wanted different providers. And during GSoC 2017, we created the entities that I talked about. These entities allow the social API to store data about the user. You can now get data from the, for instance, like if my user log in using Facebook, I can get data from, I can get like the friend list and store that into database directly without writing any single line of code. I can just specify that, and I just have that data if I want to use it later. I can do all of this bunch of stuff, a lot of the stuff with requests and authentication and getting data from providers. And he improved the user authentication flow, meaning that we were just using the email address before, and that wasn't good because maybe I authenticated using Google or maybe using Facebook, but then I changed my email address at Facebook, and then when I wanted to use Facebook again to log in into the website, I couldn't log in into the same Drupal account because I had a different email address, and that wasn't good. However, the Facebook ID is always unique and it's always the same. So we tried to change that to use user IDs. And that also allows us to have different providers associated to the same Drupal user. And this is basically the user authentication flow. If the user is logged in, that means that the user is already logged in into the Drupal website. And for instance, the user tries to add GitHub or to associate a GitHub account to the Drupal user account. And if the GitHub account was already associated, there's nothing to do. It's already associated. If it is not, you just have to add a new record to the social auth entity about GitHub, and you can get the data, the initial data. Suppose you want to get all the repositories, so you can just get all the repositories of this user if you want. But if the user is not logged in, this is like a more complicated thing going on here. If you can get the email address from the provider, if there is already a record, if the user already authenticated before, suppose I already authenticated using GitHub, and I try to log in using GitHub again, so I just log in the user. If the user if the user didn't log in using GitHub before, I check the email address, and if the email address was associated to a Drupal account, I just create a new social auth record and log in the user, and all of these comparisons are made using the user ID in the provider. And then also Himanshu works on securing the token in social posts because it's kind of dangerous. It's like risky to store the tokens in plain format in the database. So we are using OpenSSL and using the salt. I'm actually using the key defined in settings.php in Drupal, and we're just using that to encrypt the tokens and store that into database. So if the database like compromised, you can not someone else cannot just use this to do weird stuff with the users' accounts. And this is a demo social auth. This is for GitHub. I'm gonna create a new app for GitHub. I create an account.
And that is a big piece. Like you in the demo before, you kind of showed you had to go to the provider, create the API keys, or create an app, or whatever it is now. And what do we notice? Facebook is not accepting apps right now.
Yeah, I was trying to do it with Facebook, but Facebook is going through a lot of changes, so they didn't accept my app, basically. So that's why I chose GitHub.
But yeah, so just remember that this is part of the process. If you do want to work with these implementers, you usually have to go to them and create an app or get an API key or something.
So that was one of the things I was going to try to gauge from you guys was like it just seems like the social sites on out there are changing so frequently, or just they care about themselves. They don't care about the other people that the other ways in. So it almost seems like a constant battle that you guys have to keep up with to.
That's why it helps to use libraries that other people are working with.
Yeah, it's actually services usually change their API, but they don't change much in terms of how to authenticate users. So usually what they change is like the scopes and the endpoints, but we don't really manage that. You are the one who manages that. So if you want to get the user, if you want to get the friend list of your user on Facebook, you have to specify that. And I'm gonna show in a minute how you do that with GitHub. So you create an application on GitHub, and you have to provide a redirect, a callback for the authentication. So we provide that in the settings, and you have to copy that. And now we get like a client ID and a client secret, which are needed for authentication and for GitHub to validate that you are using an app.
To say this, to redirect this to localhost.
Yeah, I was doing this on my computer.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be valid as far as GitHub is concerned.
No, GitHub didn't care about redirecting to localhost, but there are services that do care about redirecting to.
Just caught my eye. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was saying the same thing when I first saw it.
Yeah. It was redirecting to my computer, and then there's an advanced settings. You can, for instance, specify other scopes that you want to ask for. For instance, I want to get the public repositories. I want to get access to that, and I want to get the user follow scope, which allows me to like make the user follow a specific user if I want to. And if I wanted to as well, I could add API calls here. For instance, I can add user repos. I actually did that. You can learn more about the scopes that GitHub provides you. Then you can also request extra data. This data is you can get this data is pulled from GitHub when the user authenticates. So when the user authenticates, we are gonna get all the public repositories and store that into a database. And then we just save the configuration. And now if I go to here, I wasn't logged in yet. So I'm gonna log in using GitHub. Just authorize GitHub to log in, and I authenticate the website, and I am now logged in. Notice that I already logged in into my website, and I want to add a Facebook and a Google account to the same user, so I can use different providers. And I can just do that. I can do that by going and clicking again on these buttons. and I can add the same. I can add a Facebook account to the same user, and I can do that for LinkedIn, and I can do that for Google as well if I want.
And the icons come with the module, right?
Oh,
Those
okay.
Icons.
Okay, this is actually a block, which is provided by the module. If you want to put the block, you can use it, but you don't have to. You can customize different links because there are just paths that you can specify to. It's like user login slash Facebook slash Google slash whatever. So you can always customize this stuff. And that's basically how social laws work. Oops. And we need help to keep working on these projects. Especially we need more implementers for social posts. We currently have only 4. However, we have 25 or more for social oath. That's a big difference. We need to refactor a lot of the code that for some reason are not in the right place. We need token encryption for social oath because the token encryption that Himanshu worked on was only for social posts. And of course, we need documentation for implementers, how to use the API, because there is a very interesting API on the social API that you can use to do a lot of cool stuff without using the interface. You can just write customized modules and work with the API if you want to. And there are a lot of things that you can do that are not documented well. And any ideas that you might have with the project itself for how to improve it or how to make it better for anyone.
Yeah, and if you are interested in mentoring or participating in Google Summer of Code, we're always
Definitely looking for more people for that. This year, we actually just selected our GSoC projects, and we did not select a social API project just because the students write the proposals, and we didn't have very good proposals for social auth. But there's other projects you can get involved with if you want to mentor. We put as many mentors on a project as possible, so it's not a big time commitment if you just want to, hey, I'm interested, like one is the stock API. If you're interested in like stock data and you kind of want to follow it or test it out, you're just one of those extra people that just can lend an extra hand, that's great. But of course, the goal here is for the social API. Again, we want to collaborate. We're kind of on a mission to get more people in the Drupal community to be aware of this and start working together and not go off and writing their own modules and doing their own things. And it seems like a lot of the social modules that have been created were created out of necessity. You know, Joe had a project and the client wanted to have Facebook auth on there. So they wrote it in their own very specific way and never touched it again. We don't want that. We want to keep up to date with all the service updates, all the API updates, and make this bigger and better. And how many people are using the module these days?
Oh, there are like, I think last time was like 40. We were like 40,000 downloads and like 2,000 websites using it. Actually, you have to use for the social API.
Yeah, look at the statistics.
It should be actually.
Oh.
If you go to the, yeah, it should be one. So there are people already using it. And I know it says beta, but it's not, like it's actually stable. There are not gonna be any API changes. We are only keeping it in beta because we have a lot of code refactoring that we would like to do before having a stable release. But we are not planning like to do any big changes to the API anymore. I mean, at least for the first version of it.
I mean, there's the evidence of people actually using this. The numbers aren't going down, they're going up. And it's interesting to kind of see back here, if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, we were talking about how there kind of was this initiative and people were coming up with these ideas and they just never wrote any code for it. That's all kind of back here. And then so yeah, you can see it kind of develop and the idea taking off when he first started this, and it's growing.
It'd be fun to see overlapped on Drupal 8 adoption.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's true also because people
Because that looks like Drupal 8 adoption.
Yeah,
if you
really.
had asked me what it looks like.
Yeah, if you would have not known what that was, he was like, what is this graph of?
and that's actually what also helped us to grow a little faster, because all of these modules that were for authentication were developed for Drupal 7. So we wanted to start doing this API, and we had Drupal 8 just coming around, so it was easy to just do it for Drupal 8 and stick to that.
Any more questions?
I know we are all tired.
Yeah, it's an end of the day. We tried to throw some jokes in there to keep you guys awake. Yeah, we're right on time.
Okay. Any questions?
Well, I mean, these guys seem to know a little bit more. How about you? Did you grasp this? Did you have any questions? Is this something that you might think of for your projects?
I'm not a coder.
It could be a site builder. There was no code. There wasn't a single line of code written.
I don't use Drupal to implement anything.
Okay.
Just try and make ideas for marketing purposes.
Content and everything. All right. Well, think about that when you're in marketing meetings and everything. Of hey, we can integrate all of these other systems and use Drupal. Our Drupal website is the hub for all of this. Don't depend on other services like Hootsuite when you're already in Drupal.
Agreed.
Cool. So you got a takeaway from that. Great. Any final comments or ideas?
Okay, I think we are done.
Cool. All right. Thanks
Okay,
for coming out, guys. Thank you, Valentine.